Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So, you may have noticed that on my channel I don't cover as many articles and things like I used to, and that's partly because they're just no longer there. A lot of what I used to cover was the comic industry that's expanded more and more to the entertainment industry as a whole, but it's because of the efforts of people that have been shining a light on these industries, trying desperately for years to show people that they're falling apart at the seams, that we no longer see much of this information that I used to use coming out. It's like someone turned on the lights and the cockroaches suddenly began to scatter. I don't know, it's probably more the termites began to scatter, but I'm not sure if termites actually scatter in the light. Do they? I'm not sure. Anyway, but the point is that a lot of people saw these lights coming on and these cockroaches scattering into their dark little holes and thought, okay, we're going to get some sanity, we're going to get things returning to normal. And no, it's not returning to normal, as I've been covering on my channel over and over again. Because, of course, and people are beginning to realize this more and more now, that if you realize that your house is infested, turning on all the lights and leaving them on all the time is not going to do you any good. You need to get an exterminator in to get rid of the problem. And of course, within the entertainment industry and certainly within the comic industry, which is the example par excellence of an industry collapsing, this is not happening. There is no will within the industry itself to correct any of the measures which caused this problem to begin with. And I don't know even if that is possible. Why? Because all of those problems are societal problems. All of those problems are cultural problems that have been baked into our culture and just are accepted by many people for the last, at least 50 years. And that's what I want to talk about in a roundabout way today. But before I get there, I just want to remind everyone that there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels, 2 superhero graphic novels, and 1 return to form for low fantasy sword and sorcery graphic novel, all based upon the original, tried and true method of making good stories, good comics, and concentrating on what I always talk about, which is a traditional hero. So if any of that sounds or looks appealing to you at all because you're looking at some of the spectacular art from those graphic novels in the background, then click on one of those links in the description or the pinned comment and go on over and see if one of my graphic novels is for you. So I want to get back to my topic, but before I even get there, I just have to warn you that I'm going to rant a little bit in this video, but not my normal kind of rant. Most people think that a rant needs to be one where I get emotional or passionate, and I may get that in this video, but it's more the fact that I'm not basing this strictly on logical reasoning that go back to first principles like I always try to do. Now, this is more based upon my experience, and it's a bit of a rambling rant, if you want to call it that. So I normally say, take what I say with a grain of salt. That is definitely the case today. And I'm doing this video in part as a response to something brought up by Richard Meyer over at Comics Matter. And yes, I know Richard doesn't listen to me, so it's not really a response to him. It's more a response in my head. But he came to the realization that comics as an industry is in such a poor state because it didn't have a whole lot of self-esteem to begin with, and these women who wanted to basically lucid dream in the real world took this as an opportunity to work at this place with some prestige and basically do whatever it is they wanted. To the extreme now of bullying people into ending their own existence. And by the way, getting away with it scot-free and having people pat them on the back saying, oh, poor you, poor you. You drove a person into his grave, but it wasn't your fault. But here's the thing. As a business owner and someone who built up a business from the ground up as one person, I just want to say to Zach, first of all, that yeah, I'm glad you got there. I'm glad you come to this realization, and I really don't want to be patronizing, but welcome to the 20th century. And oh, by the way, you're a bit behind the times because it's now the 21st century, and this has been going on within the workplace for at least 50 years now. Yeah, sure, comics and really other forms of entertainment as well, controlled by your nerd culture, they might have very low self-esteem and have been abused even more than the normal jobs within culture, but this is just the normal jobs within culture and the way that women treat these kinds of jobs, quite honestly. That is to say, they want the privilege at working where they have security, but they don't want to take any responsibility for things like working with merit, or having to compete, or having to do all of the things which you would normally think a healthy industry should do in order to stay healthy. Now, I'll get into all of that in a little bit, but I'll give you my personal experience with this as a business owner to begin with. And some of you may have heard this on my channel before. I apologize for repeating myself again. But I began my work experience within the legal realm, working for law firms, wherein I did specialized legal research. And part of that was to train people in how to do specialized legal research. And in training those people, I could pretty much tell after a couple of weeks whether or not this person was A, going to be any good at this kind of research, and B, whether or not they were even going to stick with it. Both of those things are kind of linked together. But I didn't have a full picture of this entire thing in my head until I quit the law firms and went and did this kind of research on my own as a freelancer. And I worked as a freelancer for quite some time, which is where I draw some of the parallels normally when I talk about this with things like the comic industry and the entertainment industry, where a lot of people work as freelancers. But the point is that when I was a freelancer, I also got requests every once in a while, about once, maybe twice a year, from people to say, can you train me to do this specialized legal research? Now, the majority of the people asking that question would be women. Probably 90% of the people asking that question were women. And I would look at them and say, why in the world would I do that? I'm a freelancer now. Why would I give you the information so that you could be my competitor? And the answer I would get normally from that was quite honest. And again, the majority being women would look back at me and say, no, no, I don't want your job. I don't want to do what you do. I want you to train me in how to do it so that I can then get a better job. Now, after a while of being a freelancer, I got so much work that it actually turned into a business and I had to hire people and I did the hiring myself. And when I began to hire people, I got to see the whole thing come together. Why? Because I would get both men and women applying for these positions, and the women just were not suitable for the job. Why? Because literally, since this is specialized legal research where we're dealing with things that are millions of dollars, the number one part of the job was not to make mistakes. Therefore, it would take me at least 6 to 8 months to train someone, and then I'd have to hover over them for another, at least year to make sure that I double check all of their work and nothing would go wrong. So I'm going to take at least a year and a half to train or help train a person. I need you to stick around for a little while, at the very least for 5 years. I can't have someone come in and learn all of this information and then just take off and then have to train someone else. But again, the reason why the women were not suited for this work is because that's exactly what they wanted to do. And it came into focus that, yeah, this is what they were asking me to do when I was a freelancer, to train them. They would say, no, 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 we don't want this work. We don't want to be freelancers. We want to use that information and that training in order to get us somewhere else, in order to get a more secure job, because freelancing is something where you have to fight tooth and nail, or at the very least, live in a feast and famine kind of existence. So that's number one in my experience. Number two in my experience was when I was a freelancer, I was able to take so much work away from the other people that were doing this kind of research. Why? Because the kind of research that I was doing had been taken over by freelancers. Almost, we'll say about 75% of them were women. And they turned the entire thing into a female way of running their businesses and a female way of conducting this kind of research. And even the males, which made up about 25%, then followed along this female way of conducting business for themselves. So what do I mean by female male? Well, the females had constructed this entire industry really in a way where it was all based upon the social, where you had to chat with people and had to talk to, let's say, legal secretaries or people working at the law firm, again, usually women, and ingratiate yourself to them so that they would think of you almost as a friend, so that they would give you work, all this kind of thing. And I walked in there as a freelancer and said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do this as a guy. That was not my thought at the time, but really that's what it worked out to. And as a guy, it was, I'm going to fight for this work. I'm going to compete with you. I'm going to do things like advertise and take clients away from you, because no one would dare in the female way, in the female realm of doing this kind of work, take clients away from other people doing the same job. They thought of that as forbidden because it was a community. And you don't do that to people in your community. And I walked in and again, I said, no, I'm going to compete. I'm going to take things away from you. Those are really good clients. I can do a better job than you. I'm taking them away from you and I'm going to make all that money. And it ended up with me making twice as much money as anybody else in the room for at least half the work that they did. Why? Because I did it in a I'm going to fight for this kind of way, in a masculine way, whereas everyone else was doing it in a feminine way. That's how I was able to turn it into a business so quickly. But the point is that this is not me just coming up with things off the top of my head. No, it was pretty much confirmed for me by my actions and the reactions to my actions by really the women who did this kind of research. Because when I started to compete with others and I started to take work away from them, there was a distinct reaction and it was in your face. And that reaction was from all of the females, and the females, all except for one that I can remember, what they tried to do was to make me stop competing, make me stop doing this and give clients back to other people who I had stolen, quote unquote, from them by socially ostracizing me, quite literally. Now, the guys, they didn't care. They just stopped talking to me because they didn't want to have to deal with the women in the room and their attempts to socially ostracize me. But they would literally not speak to me. If they did have to speak to me, it would be in an ignorant tone. And they would do passive aggressive things like talk about me in the third person and badmouth me without actually saying my name, but referencing who I was as we stood in line to, let's say, use the photocopier. Childish kind of things, obviously. But the point is that it was laid on thick by every last one of them, except for one. And the funny thing was that the reason why I was able to do the work that I did was because I didn't subscribe to any of that nonsense. And I was quite thrilled by the fact that they stopped talking to me and tried to ostracize me socially. Why? Because in my head, I was thinking, oh, finally, I get you to shut up. Because again, the whole point of what they are doing in being there and trying to do this job, trying to do it in quotes, job, was to do it all socially. So they would pry you away from your work every 15 to 20 minutes to tell you some inane story. Or they would be talking with each other in the background because a lot of this research is done in public buildings and public offices, and they would just drone on and it would be so hard to work. And really, they would never do that anymore around me because they thought they were trying to socially ostracize me and it would change my mind about how I did this kind of work. But literally, I was sitting there in the corner thinking to myself, finally, something shut you people up. And I could work much faster and people got out of my way because literally part of the reason why I was so good at being a freelancer is because I moved twice as fast as everybody else, physically and mentally, I might add. So why am I going over all of this from my personal life? Well, first off, as I said, it's because it was freelance work, and that does have a lot of parallels with things like the comic industry where people work mostly as freelancers. And again, as I say, I use the comic industry as the microcosm of the entertainment industry as a whole because it's the worst patient with these terminal symptoms that is literally driving itself into an early grave. But the whole point is that Richard sort of came to this realization that women have taken over the comic industry and they just treat it in a non-serious way, to say the least. And he was thinking that, as I read what he was saying, this was for the comic industry only because it had such low self-esteem. And I'm thinking to myself, no, this is the job market, Richard. This is any place where there is a majority of females running the show, majority of females doing the work. And yes, I know, I'm putting out a blanket statement. I know there are some really, really good female workers. They can do the job very well. But once you get a certain mass of them, it becomes something else. It becomes a social community, not a job. And for the majority of them, again, which I take from my experience training people, having people ask me to train them, having to hire them, go through the hiring practice, it's very easy for me to draw off of that experience and say, yeah, when I look at women in the workplace, I don't see them as being, at the very least, the most efficient people that you can hire. Or to put it in larger terms, I would say that both men and women are looking for some kind of security, but security means massively different things for women than for men. And this all goes back to the biological. Women are the caregivers, men are the hunters. Women, when they want security, especially in a job, what do? And what kind of security are they looking for? Well, typically they're looking for security in a way that, again, drawing from my own experience, if it is a job where you have to fight, they don't want to be there. They're just going to use that job in order to try to get a more and more secure position. Usually the secure position in the type of work that I was doing was they wanted to be hired either by a very large law firm, or more coveted than that was being hired by the government. Because, of course, daddy government would take care of all of their problems, give them all the breaks that they needed, and make sure they had a fat little package at the end of it when they wanted to retire. That was being taken care of. But guys, no. Guys wanted to be freelancers. Guys wanted to have that opportunity, that freedom to fight when they work, because each guy thinks to himself, yeah, I can fight enough. I can fight well enough so that I can make more than the other guy. And once I have that secure position, once I have fought for that secure position and obtained it, yeah, that's my security. And to bring it into an even more abstract way of thinking, for a female, a place of security is a place where they're taken care of so they can take care of other people, supposedly. That's really what the biological drive is pushing towards. Now, for your modern women, a lot of them don't have anybody to take care of, so this is why they get themselves a horde of cats, or decide that some minority is the poor baby that they need to take care of. But anyway, my point is that this is their form of security. They want a form of security where they're taken care of so they can take care of someone else. But for a guy, what is an area of security for a guy? Well, for a guy, that area is, in its most abstract, a place where I don't have to die. Quite literally, because it's a place where, first of all, you don't have to fight. And why don't you want to fight? Because if you fight, there's always a chance of dying. Do you see the massive difference in those definitions of security for men and women? Again, women is a place where I get taken care of. Men, it's a place where I don't die. This is why we have expressions like a man's home is his castle. Why? Because a castle is a secure position wherein you don't need to fight and die. This is also, by the way, why a guy can look at a picture of an apartment with 2 sticks of furniture, a chair, a mattress, and maybe a television and think, oh, that's heaven. Why? Because they don't need all of this excess. All they need is a place where they don't have to die. Or I suppose, less dramatic, a place where they don't have to fight. That's why a guy will choose an apartment with 2 sticks of furniture over a home that's worth a lot of money with everything he could ever dream of, and a female companion that makes his life miserable by fighting with him all the time. Because for a guy out there in the world, whenever you leave your little home, whenever you leave your little secure area, which is very small, you fight. Always. Always it is a fight. Women do not have that experience. And it is a privileged position. It was like that comedy video I ran across a couple of years ago, or a year ago or so, where it showed a guy and a girl on his arm, and they're walking through a mall, and you get to hear the internal monologue of each of them. For the woman, she was going la-di-da-di-da, singing a song in her head to herself, whereas the guy is walking through there thinking to himself, okay, we have 2 exits on our right, 1 on our left. The guy over in the corner, he looks kind of sketchy. Let's veer away from him. Okay, move this way and put yourself between this crowd of people and my girl, all these kinds of things. That's the difference between the internal monologues of a guy and a girl. And yes, I know it is a comedy skit, so it's meant for exaggeration, but really, it has a definite kernel of truth to it. And again, the whole reason why I'm going over all this is because it is most definitely this way in the workplace, and has been that way for the last, at least 50 years. Guys look at a job and say, I need to fight. This is a battle. I need to provide for, let's say, not only myself, but also my wife or my children or my elderly parents or whatever else. It's a fight. And therefore, you get them concentrating on what is going to be the most efficient way of fighting, and usually that's merit. But for women, this is an extra. These jobs are extras. They're things that they could just trade up for more and more security, especially within the modern socialist kinds of governments that we have, wherein people can say to themselves, oh, well, daddy government will take care of me if I lose my job. And yes, I'm being sort of hyperbolic with all of this stuff that I had said, except for my own personal experience over the last couple of minutes, because this doesn't extend to every last female individual, certainly not. But the point is, once again, that the reason why women are able to do this is because they have always had a privileged position within well, not just society, but human existence, really. Why? Well, as I have said before, the reason why is because if the human race was reduced to 100 women and one guy, well, you could easily restart the human race. But if the human race was reduced to 100 guys and one woman, you can pretty much kiss the human race goodbye. You see, this is one of the things that most people still don't get. It's the fact that you really need to listen to these quote unquote progressive people. They are telling the truth, it's just the truth turned on its head. They're using terminology and what they say as things that actually exist. They're just using them in the very reverse way that they actually exist. So you have all these feminists and all these other movements that generate themselves from feminism talking about privilege, saying all of these other people have privilege, therefore we need to do X, Y, and Z in order to take away their privilege. And it is all about privilege, but the thing is, again, it's all flipped on its head. They're saying that not because other people have privilege and they want some kind of quote unquote justice, it's because they have always had privilege and they're trying to protect their own privilege. And yes, I'm saying these feminist ways of thinking and their subsequent ideological children, because as I did a video on many years ago, I went through actual feminist literature from actual feminist journals and showed that, yes, feminism literally thinks of itself, again, according to these articles from their own publications, as a virus. They talk about it in terms of being a virus, which must then contaminate other forms of language and other disciplines and other ways of thinking, ideological ways of thinking, so that they impart to those ideological children the same ideas that originate from feminism. So all of these things with critical race theory, etc., all of these things that you see around you, these quote unquote progressive ideological strains, yeah, they all can really trace their origin in some way back to these feminist ideas. And again, as someone who has studied the origin and history of ideas within several degrees, I'm confident in saying the following. First off, yes, women have always had a privileged position within society. I can remember almost first year university taking medieval history because my first degree was in history. And this was the first time I actually read primary documents from the medieval period. And within our class, we had to read these primary documents written by this woman. She was a noble woman who lived within the Middle Ages. And we had a seminar class on it. And all the rest of the people were talking about how this woman was oppressed and how horrible her existence was. And I'm looking at them going, you people are crazy. I'm looking at this woman's life and she has it made. You do realize that her brothers have to go out and fight in war. Or if not that, either become a priest or join the civil service so that they help run the government. They had no leeway in what they had to do. And these were noblemen. Do you know what a nobleman knight had to do? He was trained in religion up until he was about the age 7. Between 7 and 13, he became a servant in a higher up station within someone else's court, so he could learn all the inner workings of a court. From 13 to about 16, he was on the battlefield as a page, and then he became a full-fledged knight and had to go fight and die. And yet, this woman, yeah, sure, she was quote-unquote stuck in this palace and their own little estate. But again, do you not understand that in medieval times, you did not know what was over the next hill? Having a map was illegal. If you were caught with a map, you were executed as a spy. So no one traveled like that. You couldn't just get up and do things. And these people, they were insane in this class, talking about how this noble woman who sat in her room and wrote these little treatises was so oppressed. I'm thinking, you people are crazy. She has the most privileged position in the world, and it has always been that way. But again, you jump forward to the advent of feminism, where you had these women saying, we want equal rights, okay? You are granted equal rights. Now, what does second, third, and fourth wave feminism want? Well, they want to have those rights without any of the subsequent duties that come along with those rights. They want to maintain their position of privilege while still having all the rest of the rights that everyone else has. I'm sorry, it does not work that way. And I suppose I should be clear, I'm talking about rights in the unalienable rights realm here. I'm talking about it from an American position. I'm not talking about it in the terms of European or Canadian or any other position where they think that rights are granted by the government, therefore the government can take them away. That itself is ridiculous, and I won't go into why right now, but it is. But the point is that rights themselves always, always, without exception, and we're talking unalienable rights here, but they always come with an attached duty. There is absolutely no way rights exist in the way that they were conceived of and in the way that they make logical, rational sense without that caveat being in there. But most people don't understand that. And this is why, for my money, I'm a conservative, because I see absolutely no future for liberalism within a world where rights exist. Why? Because within liberalism, you say to yourself, well, anyways, the modern form of liberalism is that liberty is the ability of me to do basically whatever it is I want. No, I'm sorry. If you actually follow the system of rights and you think people have rights, no, you have duties. Those duties ensure that in certain areas of your life, you got no say. You have to do this thing because you have those rights. You have to fulfill that attached duty to those rights or you do wrong. And again, if you do wrong, if you abuse your rights, just like murdering someone or stealing from them, then the government, as an organ of protecting the rights of its citizens, has itself the right to put you in prison, or perhaps take away your existence. But again, the point being that feminism itself is based upon, well, we as females want equal rights to men, but now that we have those equal rights, no, we don't want to have any of those duties that subsequently come along with those rights. That's what second, third, and fourth wave feminism are all about, securing their position of privilege. And I suppose I should distinguish the fact that, yes, when you talk about rights, you also talk about rights and privileges. Rights are themselves generated from the fact that you exist as a human being. The privileges that are attached to those rights flow from those original unalienable rights. And even those privileges do come with duties attached. And really, the best example I can come up with this is the fact that why in the world were all of these men granted citizenship and the right to vote to begin with? Why? Well, because they had to assume the attached duty of the fact that, okay, you get to vote and have a say within the makeup of this country's government, because if the government decides to take your country and put it into a war, you get to go to the war. You got no say in it. It's your duty. You're going on the battlefield if we say so. That is your subsequent duty with the right to vote. But women, of course, are exempt from that. But they want the right to vote even though they're exempt from that. And I got no problem with them being exempt from that. I don't want women on the battlefield. That would just make things so much worse. But the point is that men and women do indeed have different duties. And if that was not their duty in order to obtain the right to vote, or at the very least to claim that right as a part, a privilege of what is theirs by being human beings, well, their duty was to bear male children so that those children could then go off and fight in war if necessary. But of course, that got jettisoned right out the window pretty soon after you started to see second wave feminism and all the subsequent ways of thinking about feminism. And again, this is the liberal way of thinking that liberty means that I can do whatever it is I want. No. The actual way of liberty as it is conceived according to the idea of rights is you have the freedom to do what is right. That's it. That's where your freedom stops. If you try to do something that is wrong, no, your freedom is no longer there. You're actually, by the way, enslaving yourself to an error, to a lie, and you can have that liberty taken away from you because you're now a threat to society. And the government's role within these rights is to protect other people's rights. But again, why am I going on this rant, rabbit hole, rambly whole thing about rights and feminism and females in the workplace? It's because, of course, these women and feminism itself has morphed fairly quickly into the idea that, yes, we want these rights and privileges without any of the subsequent duties that come attached. This is not just something that you see within the workplace, it is something you see within our entire culture. And the workplace attitude of people, especially women within the workplace, is just a byproduct of people accepting this somehow as a fact. And again, the whole point of second, third, fourth wave feminism is the fact that they're claiming other people have privilege because they themselves have privilege and want to protect that privilege, wherein people are starting to wake up to the fact that, hey, wait a second, you got all of these rights and privileges, but don't have any of the duties? And again, it's not stopping. They don't want to stop it. The people on your progressive left want to push this so far that they now want to give voting rights to people who are not only not citizens of your country, but people whose first act in coming into your country was to violate the very laws of the country coming in to begin with. They want these people to have voting rights. They don't pay taxes. They don't belong there. They just violated the law. That was their first act. Why in the world would you extend the privilege of voting to these people? Why? Because in their minds, these rights and privileges that extend from your unalienable rights, should be extended to everyone, because no one should have an attached duty with these rights. Again, this is your left way of thinking. This is your way of defining liberty on the left. No, we don't have any duties. To say that I have a duty that I didn't choose, well, no, that's wrong. I'm sorry, but again, as far as I'm concerned, there is absolutely no future wherein there continues to exist the idea of unalienable rights and Western liberal democracy. There just isn't. We're rapidly advancing to the point where you have to choose one or the other. Either you choose an existence where you think that you can do whatever it is you want with your liberty, or you choose an existence where you have rights. But again, why am I talking about all this? What connection does it have in any way whatsoever to entertainment? Well, number one, it has connection through what I was talking about at the first, which is the job market to begin with. Yes, you're going to have women treat these kinds of jobs, really any kind of job, as if it was lucid dreaming, as if it was a fantasy realm where they can do whatever it is they want. Why? Because their idea is to secure a more and more secure position where they don't have to take care of themselves. But they're already in that position to begin with because of the privilege of being a woman. Men don't have that privilege. Therefore, if you have industries that are controlled by women who turn it into this social community, yeah, it's gonna fall apart. Or if it does actually continue to exist, it will not exist in any way, shape, or form as a system of merit that runs well. And all it takes is one guy stepping in there thinking to himself, yeah, I'm gonna fight here. These people are sheep. I'm gonna fight and take over. All it takes is one guy to disrupt the entire process. Why? Because he's working on a system of merit. Why? Because he's working on a system wherein he wants things to work as efficiently as possible. So the point is that no, these systems and industries are not going to go back to any healthy form at all. Just turning on all of the lights so that we can see all of these problems is not going to drive the cockroaches out. You need to get a fumigator in there. And yes, we're going to have to roll things back to, at least the 1950s. And this is why I say things like the fact that I'm not even on the political spectrum. Why? Because I'm so far right that it is no longer even considered part of the political spectrum. And when I mean so far right, do I mean saluting 1930s German? No, those people are on the far left. When I mean so far right, I mean back to the 1950s to begin with. If we want to get to the last known good, I would say we'd probably have to go back to the 1200s. That is to say, go back to a time where men were men and women were women, and each of them understood their duty, men as men and women as women, and used that to build up societies that came to the conclusion that yes, we have unalienable rights. And oh, by the way, those unalienable rights come with those subsequent duties. They actually, in some way, emanate from them, hand in hand. So crying about the fact that this is what the comic industry looks like because women are using these jobs, or even the entertainment industry itself, women are using these jobs just to get better and better jobs. They want to move from comics to having Netflix pitches and everything else. This is par for the course for the last 50 years. They just want to trade up. They're not there to actually build anything like a secure position for this industry. They just want to use it. Again, this is the mindset that has been drilled into people's heads from feminism, this virus that has contaminated so many things, which they claim is a virus, and claim that it does so, and poisoned the idea that this is how work is supposed to work. And that's where I get into where this is all connected to entertainment. Because is there any hope? If this is the case, is there any hope? Well, I see the entertainment industry as being the canary in the coal mine. If we cannot turn around the entertainment industry, which you may see as completely superfluous, but it isn't. It's mostly superfluous, but one of the things about entertainment is it is a society telling stories to itself about itself, which is to say, it is a society describing what it wants to be in an abstract way. And if we want to actually turn things around, even minuscule little efforts to turn this whole thing around so that we can possibly get back to, again, some kind of normalcy. We need to tell better stories about ourselves to ourselves. We need to have things like heroic stories, heroes who are, as I say, paragons of virtue, which are devoted to ideas of truth, which understand that there is a duty that comes with power. And not just power, but with human existence itself. If we cannot get back to a point where we can tell ourselves stories like that about ourselves, if we cannot get back to a point where we can inspire ourselves to follow what is good, then society ain't going to change. And to go back to my analogy from the beginning, it doesn't matter if you know that your house is infested and you go around flipping on lights everywhere and keep them on forever. That's not going to help. You need to fumigate the bloody place. And really, I guess the question is now that do we have enough people left to take on the Herculean task of cleaning out the stables of the workplace, especially for the entertainment industry, so that we can go back to telling real, heroic stories about ourselves so that we can be inspired to change the whole course of our civilization for the better. All right, so I've ranted long enough on this. If I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and of course, leave a comment. I'm sure plenty of people will disagree with me on plenty of things in this video, so leave a comment about that. And don't forget, there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels. You're looking at some of the beautiful art from those in the background. They are based upon inspirational stories of true heroes, so if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and order yourself a copy of one of my graphic novels today. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.